In an unexpected and deeply emotional moment, Hollywood legend Denzel Washington was seen breaking down in tears during a live TV appearance after receiving a surprise call from Burkina Faso's president, Ibrahim Traoré. What was said on that call left both the studio audience and viewers worldwide stunned. This unforgettable exchange proved that true leadership and respect can transcend borders, cultures, and even fame. It was supposed to be an ordinary late-night talk show. The crowd erupted in cheers as Denzel Washington stepped onto stage, calm, warm, legendary. The host greeted him with high energy, cracking jokes and playing clips from his latest film. But behind Denzel's easy laughter, there was a distant look in his eyes, as if a part of him was somewhere far away. Halfway through the show, the host grinned and said, "We got a little surprise for you tonight, Denzel, a live call from someone very far away." Denzel raised an eyebrow. "What kind of surprise?" he asked. The screen behind him lit up. A flag appeared, Burkina Faso. Confused murmurs filled the studio. Then a voice, steady, respectful, gentle, came through. "Good evening, Mr. Washington. This is Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition of Burkina Faso." Denzel froze. The room went pin-drop silent. For the first time in the show's history, you could hear nothing but one man's breath caught in his throat. No one, absolutely no one, expected what came next. Denzel's hands trembled slightly as the president spoke, his French-tinged English calm, but deeply sincere. "You don't know me, Mr. Washington, but when I was 14 years old, I was just a barefoot boy in Burkina Faso. I saw you in glory. I saw a black man, not begging, not afraid, but strong and standing for justice." Denzel blinked rapidly. The host sat frozen. Ibrahim's voice continued. "That night, I told my mother, one day I'll fight for people too, like him." Years later, when the people of my country needed someone to stand tall, I remembered your strength, your words, your eyes. I stood, not because I was fearless, but because I had seen what courage looked like in you. The room held its breath. Denzel lowered his hand from his mouth, his eyes already red with tears. "You're telling me I helped shape a president?" he asked, voice trembling. "No, sir," Ibrahim replied softly. "You helped shape a man who refused to kneel to injustice." A single tear slid down Denzel's cheek. "Thank you, my brother." The audience gasped softly. But what the president said next stunned everyone even more. Denzel leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. The host sat stiffly, eyes wide. Ibrahim spoke again. "Today I speak not just as a president, but as a man who owes a debt. In Burkina Faso, when someone saved your soul, we do not forget. Mr. Washington, I am officially inviting you to be honored in Ouagadougou. But more than that, I wish to name a leadership school after you. A place where our children will learn to stand tall, just as I learned from watching you." Another gasp swept through the crowd. The host whispered, "Wow." Denzel's voice cracked. "Mr. President, I don't deserve that." Traoré's warm smile flickered on the screen. "That's why you do." The screen faded to black. And there on national TV, in front of millions, Denzel Washington buried his face in his hands and sobbed. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming truth that sometimes a single life can echo across oceans and generations. But this was only the beginning. Within 24 hours, Denzel was packing his bags. Burkina Faso was calling, and what waited there would shake the world. He didn't sleep that night. He kept replaying Ibrahim's words, his eyes still red long after the cameras stopped rolling. By morning, social media had erupted. Denzel Traoré trended in over 20 countries. Fans, journalists, and world leaders praised the raw moment, calling it one of the most powerful live TV moments in decades. But while the world buzzed, Denzel quietly packed his bag. Not for a movie, but for something that felt sacred. He booked the next flight to Burkina Faso. No entourage, no spotlight, just him, a single backpack, and a heart full of questions he didn't know how to answer. As the plane lifted off, he stared out the window and whispered, "I don't know what I'm walking into, but I know I have to go." Back in Ouagadougou, President Traoré stood by the palace window, watching the distant runway lights. His aides asked, "Should we prepare the press?" Traoré shook his head. "No cameras. No speeches, just truth. Something powerful was about to unfold. Neither man knew that within 48 hours, they would cry again, this time, together. When Denzel's flight landed, there were no cameras flashing, no red carpets rolled out, just silence. A black SUV waited on the tarmac. Beside it stood one man, simply dressed, no medals, no security. It was him, President Ibrahim Traoré. Denzel stepped off the plane slowly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, no words were needed. They embraced not a celebrity and leader, but as two men whose lives had crossed continents and time. "I'm honored you came," Ibrahim said quietly. Denzel smiled faintly. "I didn't come as a star." Denzel smiled faintly. "I didn't come as a star. I came as a brother." The SUV carried them down dusty roads, past bustling markets and barefoot children waving as they passed, no one knowing who was inside. They arrived at a modest clay tin house. Sun-worn and humble. "This was my home," Traoré said softly. He opened the door. Inside, no guards, no luxury. Just old photos, a woven mat, and memories echoing in silence. Then, Ibrahim handed Denzel a wrinkled photograph, a young boy clutching the hand of an older woman. "She raised me when my parents worked day and night. She fed me, bathed me, told me stories of strength." His voice lowered to a whisper, "And she's still alive." They drove another hour along winding village roads. Few words were spoken. Denzel stared at the photo, the woman's wide smile, gentle eyes, and a strength that could only be shaped by time. "Where is she now?" Denzel asked. Troy's jaw tightened. "She still works, cleaning classrooms in a rural school." Denzel turned slowly, disbelief in his eyes. "At 85? The president nodded. "She never asked for help. She says, 'God gave me legs. I'll use them till he takes them.'" When they arrived, the school looked warm but full of life. Children ran barefoot, drawing shapes in the dust with sticks. Then she came into view, bent, broom in hand, yet proud. The same woman from a photograph. Denzel stepped out of the car, frozen in place. Traoré walked toward her. She looked up, her eyes misting over. "Ibrahim," she whispered. He rushed into her arms. "Mahoa," they wept together. Then Denzel stepped forward. She looked at him. Her hands trembled. You're him," she said, touching his face gently. And there, in one quiet courtyard in Burkina Faso, time stood still. 3 souls, 3 stories, bound in a single moment that would melt hearts across the world. But what happened next would shake the world even more. Nation Hawa sat between Denzel and President Traoré under the shade of an ancient baobab tree near the village school. Her hands were rough, her back slightly bent, but her voice still carried the warmth of a mother's love. She spoke of young Ibrahim, how he would cry in her arms when the nights were too cold, how he once gave her his only piece of mango so she wouldn't go hungry. Denzel listened with a softness in his eyes that the world rarely saw. Then, with trembling fingers, Mama Hawa reached into the pocket of her faded apron. "I kept this all these years," she said, pulling out a folded, yellowed scrap of paper. In a child's handwriting it read, "One day I will be a leader and I will find you, Mama. I promise." Traoré gasped. He remembered that note. He'd written it at age 9 on her birthday, after she had given him her only piece of bread. Denzel wiped a tear from his cheek. "She held on to hope," he whispered. "That's the most powerful kind of faith." Just then, a young student ran up barefoot, giggling, holding a cracked plastic ball. "Mama, will you play?" And she did, barefoot, laughing, broom forgotten for a moment, the simple embodiment of love given freely. Watching her, something inside Denzel shifted. He was no longer just visiting. He had found something sacred. That evening, Denzel and Traoré returned to the palace, but the mood had changed. Neither spoke much. Both men sat in a hush of thoughts too big for words. Then Traoré stood. "I want to show you something I've never shown anyone outside my family." He led Denzel down a narrow stone corridor, each step echoing against quiet walls. No guards following. At the end was a thick wooden door. Traoré unlocked it. Inside was a small room, dimly lit, filled with old books, leather-bound journals, faded maps, and one large framed photo. Mama Hawa, laughing, her arm around young Ibrahim. "This is my real treasure room," Traoré said. Denzel was speechless. The president picked up an old, battered notebook. Its pages filled with the scribbled dreams of a boy who'd grown up to lead a nation. "All of this started with her," Traoré said, voice low. "I'm here because she believed I was worth something, even when I had nothing." Denzel touched the page gently. "You lead like a son who remembers love," he said. Traoré nodded. "And I want the world to know leadership isn't about power. It's about gratitude." The room fell silent. 2 men, 1 mission, to honor the woman who had shaped the president's heart. And Denzel had an idea, one that would take everyone by surprise, especially Mama Hawa. At dawn, Denzel sat outside on the palace terrace, watching the sun rise over Ouagadougou. He kept replaying her face, her laugh, her quiet power. Then Ibrahim joined him, settling into the chair beside him. "I had a thought," Denzel said, sipping tea. "Let's give her the honor she never asked for." Traoré's lips curved into a slow, knowing smile. "I was hoping you'd say that." That afternoon, quietly, without alerting the press, they drove back to the village school. A few trusted aides came along. Children gathered, giggling barefoot. Teachers stood in a respectful hush. Mama Hawa looked confused. "What's happening?" she asked. Traoré stepped forward and knelt before her. In his hands, a small velvet box. Inside lay a golden medallion, engraved with her name and the national seal. "For your service to this nation as a mother, teacher, and guardian of hope," he said, his voice unsteady. The children clapped, their laughter echoing like tiny bells. Denzel then stepped forward, tears brimming. "And from the world you never saw, the world of cinema," he said, pulling out an envelope. "I spoke with my producer this morning. Your story will become a film, and every cent will go to building schools in your name." Mama Hawa dropped to her knees, sobbing. She had spent her life giving, and now, at last, she was receiving. But the biggest surprise was yet to come. 3 days later, Denzel returned to Los Angeles for a live TV interview on one of America's biggest late-night shows. It was supposed to be lighthearted, red carpets, laughter, jokes about upcoming movies. But behind his smile, something had changed. As the cameras rolled, the host leaned in. "So, tell us about your trip to Africa." Denzel paused. Then he asked, "Can I take a call?" The host blinked. "Live?" Denzel nodded. The crew scrambled to connect it. Moments later, the screen behind him lit up, and it was President Ibrahim Traoré, live from Burkina Faso. The studio fell silent. "Mr. Washington," Traoré began, his tone warm, "your visit reminded us that kindness knows no borders." Then he added, "You honor my people. Now I want to honor someone you inspired." He gestured, and Mama Hawa appeared beside him on the screen, holding a simple phone, eyes shining. The audience gasped. Denzel's lips quivered. His hand trembled. Traoré continued, "You reminded the world that those with the loudest voices must sometimes pause to listen." Then Mama Hawa spoke, her broken English gentle but clear. "Thank you, my son." Denzel dropped his head and wept on live TV, and so did millions watching. Within minutes, the clip went viral. It wasn't about movies anymore. It was about something deeper. Twitter exploded. Hashtag Mama Hawa. Hashtag President Hearts. Hashtag Denzel Breaks Silence. From Paris to Johannesburg, Tokyo to Atlanta, people shared stories of the women who raised them, who shaped them. An old photo of Traoré hugging Mama Hawa in her tiny kitchen became a symbol of hope. News outlets paused their endless cycles of politics and war to replay the moment. Denzel, tears streaming, Traoré speaking softly, Mama Hawa whispering, "Thank you." CNN called it the most human moment ever caught on live TV. But something even more astonishing began to happen. Donations started flooding in. A humble GoFundMe page, created quietly by one of the village students, had aimed to raise $10,000 for new classroom roofs. In just 2 hours, it hit $1 million. People didn't just watch. They felt, and they acted, in a divided world. The story of a soldier's promise, a mother's love, and an actor's tears brought strangers together. But while the world watched, Mama Hawa was fading. Her body had given so much for so long, and she had one last wish. By the 6th day of this extraordinary week, Mama Hawa asked to see Denzel and Ibrahim alone. No cameras, no microphones, just 3 souls in a quiet room. "I am old," she said softly, her voice fragile but strong. "I won't see next planting season." Both men shook their heads, begging her to rest, to hold on, but she smiled. "I have no fear. My only wish is that no child in Burkina Faso ever goes to school hungry." A single tear slipped down Traoré's cheek. She reached for Denzel's hand. "And you," she whispered, "you tell stories that matter. The world listens to you. Tell this story." Then she pulled a small scarf from under her pillow. Faded, patched, stitched with care. It was the same scarf young Ibrahim had used to tie around her arm when he played president in the courtyard. She placed it in Traoré's hands. "My first medal," she said, eyes twinkling. Finally, she looked at them both and spoke her last words. "Take care of each other." They held her gently as her eyes closed for the final time. Outside, the sun was rising, and so was her legacy. President Ibrahim Traoré stood in silence beside Mama Hawa's bed, and Denzel, tears falling, knew the story was only beginning. Holding the scarf, the small room smelled of shea butter and old books. Denzel knelt at her feet, his head bowed, shoulders trembling. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, quietly, Traoré said, "She gave me everything when I had nothing. Now I must give everything back." He turned to Denzel, lifting the scarf like a royal emblem. "We will build something in her name. A school, a garden, a future." Denzel looked up, eyes swollen. Yes, we will. I'll help." Outside, the villagers had gathered. Somehow they knew. Mama Hawa was gone. President Traoré stepped out into the morning light, held the scarf high, and declared, "Mama has gone to rest, but her spirit will feed generations." The crowd burst into tears, embracing one another under the rising sun. Within 12 hours, the news spread around the globe. Burkina Faso declares National Day of Mourning for Mama Hawa. That night, during a press conference, Traoré stood strong but tearful and promised, "Every child in Burkina Faso will know her name." As for Denzel, he quietly canceled every upcoming appearance and film promo. When asked why, he simply said, "I played kings and generals, but today I serve a mother." The next morning, the sun rose gently over Burkina Faso. In the village square, a simple wooden casket sat surrounded by fresh flowers and soft drum beats. There were no marble statues or velvet ropes, just silence and respect. President Traoré walked behind the casket alone, carrying only one thing, the scarf. Denzel followed, his suit wrinkled from sleep, his eyes raw with grief. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Messages poured in from around the world, leaders, celebrities, ordinary people. But what touched everyone most was a letter from a barefoot boy in Niger who had walked for 2 days to deliver a note. "Thank you for raising our president." As the casket was lowered into the earth, the village sang. Children wept. Elders held each other close. A bird landed on the grave and didn't move. Then Denzel stepped forward, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a necklace. It had belonged to his father. "She reminds me of him," he whispered. Strong, quiet, never asked for anything. He placed the necklace gently on the grave and murmured, "Goodbye, Mama." Even the cameras lowered. Some moments are too sacred for screens. That night, President Ibrahim Traoré and Denzel Washington sat together under the stars, cross-legged on a straw mat. The fire cracked quietly between them. They didn't need speeches. They had just buried the woman who had shaped both their lives, one with her hands, the other with her spirit. Finally, Traoré said softly, "Denzel, this week, I remembered who I am." Denzel nodded. "Me too." In the hush of that night, they made a pact, not written in ink but sealed in pain, gratitude, and hope. By dawn, plans had begun for the Mama Hawa Foundation, a joint effort to provide food, education, and emotional healing for rural children in Burkina Faso and beyond. Denzel pledged his entire next film salary to it. But the most powerful part wasn't the money. It was a new short video he released just before flying home. In it, Denzel looked straight into the camera and said, "If one woman in a tiny village can raise a future president and change the heart of a Hollywood actor, then what are we waiting for?" The video went viral, 100 million views in 24 hours. The world held its breath, waiting to see what would come next. 3 days after the funeral, Denzel returned quietly to the U.S. No red carpets, no paparazzi, but the producers of his long-scheduled live interview insisted the show must go on. Denzel agreed on one condition: let me speak from my heart. No script. The studio was bright. The audience was buzzing. They expected laughs, a few movie jokes, maybe a funny story about Africa. Instead, when the host asked, "Denzel, you've traveled the world. What's one moment that changed your soul?" he didn't answer right away. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the scarf. Holding it gently, he whispered into the microphone, "President Ibrahim Traoré called me, and I couldn't breathe. He reminded me that greatness isn't in awards. It's in mothers who wash your wounds and presidents who remember them." The host, clearly moved, asked, "And what exactly did he say?" Denzel's eyes filled. He picked up his phone, pressed play, and let the studio hear Traoré's recorded words. "Thank you for honoring a woman the world forgot, but who made a man the world remembers." In that moment, Denzel broke down in front of millions, and so did millions watching. The clip spread like wildfire. Families paused their dinners. Newsrooms went silent. Twitter flooded with messages. "I've never cried so hard over a stranger's love." "Calling my mom tonight." "Who is Ibrahim Traoré?" "The world needs more leaders like him." Across Africa, stories of forgotten mothers surfaced. In America, youth groups held candlelight vigils in Mama Hawa's honor. But in Burkina Faso, something even more unexpected happened. Children from villages everywhere began writing letters. Not to Santa or celebrities, but to President Traoré. One letter read, "If I work hard like you, will I make my mother proud too?" After the interview, Denzel stayed quiet. But the next morning, he posted a single photo on Instagram, a lone tree standing in a field in Burkina Faso. The caption read, "She watered roots that now hold up nations." No hashtags, no press tour, just truth. Exactly 1 week after that first surprise call, a statue was unveiled in Ouagadougou. Not a king or a general or a president, but a mother holding a child's hand, a simple scarf draped over her shoulder. A bronze plaque read, "To Mama Hawa, the mother of all leaders." President Ibrahim Traoré stood beside Denzel, both men holding candles, heads bowed. Neither spoke. Some endings are too sacred for words. That night, the wind blew softly through the city streets. Villagers swore they could feel Mama Hawa's spirit brushing gently against their cheeks, reminding them they were not alone. And back in Hollywood, Denzel made one final promise. He announced the Hawa Fund, a scholarship program for girls in rural Africa who dream of leading. When reporters begged for a quote, he just said, "Some phone calls change your schedule. This one changed my soul." Dear viewers, if this story touched you, made you cry, made you think, or reminded you of someone you love, please subscribe, and comment below with, "I believe in the power of love and leadership." Your words matter. Let's make stories like this travel the world and remind people that greatness isn't about fame. It's about heart. Drop your thoughts below. Share this with someone who needs hope today. And never forget, one act of love can echo across generations. Thank you for watching.